just like through Israelite history. You had the whole nation of Israel, but only a remnant really serving God. It's been the same with church history. That the people that persecuted Jews, the people that gave the Jews the choice of baptism or death, they were no more Christian than the man in the moon.
What's up, everyone? Jeff Morgan here, and we are back with Dr. Michael Brown, and today we will be discussing and answering historical Jewish objections to Jesus as Messiah and Savior of the world.
Let's get into some historical objections to Jesus. And just as a reminder, Dr. Brown has published a 5-volume series called Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. The link to that can be found in the description below. So some historical objections. If Jesus really is for the Jews, why have so many atrocities been committed on our Jewish people in the name of Jesus?
First, it's completely inexcusable. This is a terrible history. It's undeniable. And it really starts to grow once Christianity becomes the religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century. Because up until then, there were polemics, and there may have been some demonizing of the Jewish people by some church leaders, but there were no laws being passed. There was no discriminatory action because the Christians themselves were heavily persecuted in a minority. But what happened, as inexcusable as it is, my most translated book focuses on church history through Jewish eyes. It's called Our Hands Are Stained with Blood. So I've written about it and sought to educate the church. Paul warned about it. Paul warned Gentile believers in Rome not to become arrogant, not to forget their Jewish roots, not to dishonor the Jewish people. And when the church became arrogant because of ignorance and developed this theology that we call replacement theology or supersessionism, it said that the church superseded Israel, the church replaced Israel, the church was the new Israel, that once this was being taught, and then as much of the church fell away from the Bible, in other words, you had a small remnant of real believers and a large outward church that had very little connection to the church. Just like through Israelite history, you had the whole nation of Israel, but only a remnant really serving God. It's been the same with church history. That the people that persecuted Jews, the people that gave the Jews the choice of baptism or death, they were no more Christian than the man in the moon. They probably never read the Bible in their own lives.
That's a good point.
What we have to do is say what happened was horrific and inexcusable. But also throughout church history, you find a steady stream of great love for the Jewish people, of people willing to sacrifice for the Jewish people. You see, right through the Holocaust, the Corrie ten Booms, and these others, the righteous Gentiles, most of the people who did what they did sacrificially to save Jewish lives did it because they were Christian. Those were the real Christians in the midst of things. And what's also interesting, as I've traveled the world, I've been overseas more than 150 trips. I've been to countries like India 27 times, would have been 29 if not for COVID. Been around the world, been in South Korea, and been in Japan and China and the Philippines, and, a lot of places that are anything but Western Christian. And when I share some of this history, right, in Africa, different places, when I share some of this history, they're shocked. Yeah. They'd never heard of it. They pray regularly for Israel. They love Israel. I remember an Iranian Christian saying to me, anyone who hates the Jews is not a Christian. They're mortified. So this has been a phenomenon, especially in Anglo-Christianity. And what we have to say is, look, it's aberrant, it's terrible, it's inexcusable, but who are Israel's best friends today? Evangelical Christians. Why? Because they take the Bible literally, and therefore they love Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah. I've been sharing Jesus with someone very close to me for quite a while now. And I had him read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And I wanted to know what his takeaway was. And it really surprised me. He said, what I got from the book was how few real Christians there probably really are in the world. And I said, wow. I said, I wanted you to get something different from the book, but you know what? Great insight. And that just hits on what you just talked about.
Yeah, I remember when I was invited to debate the rabbi that had befriended me as a new believer. Now it's years later. I was getting my doctorate, and he invited me to do some debates with him at his synagogue. And I remember him saying publicly, one of the things I learned from Michael is that most of the people that call themselves Christians are not really Christian.
Yeah.
So, it's a reality. God tells Elijah, I have 7,000 in Israel who haven't bowed the knee to Baal. That's a tiny percentage of the population, but that's how bad Israel was. So when you look at certain parts of church history and dominated by a major traditional church that has its own armies and kingdom and stuff like that, there's only a small remnant there that's Christian. And you have Christians around the world, but a lot of that story wasn't told. A lot of the story of African Asian Christianity, some of the key centers got wiped out in the 13th century with the rise and spread of Islam. And that history was very different. So we have to try to find the true church in the midst of a lot of this.
Yeah. Another objection is that the New Testament is anti-Semitic. Could the way that Jewish leaders are portrayed, how the Jewish leaders were portrayed in the New Testament, lead people to anti-Semitism? And how should the New Testament be read to avoid this?
Right. So the New Testament is absolutely not anti-Semitic. But if you read the Old Testament a certain way, you could conclude that the Old Testament is anti-Semitic. The same with the New. In other words, in the Old Testament, God says about Israel's stiff-necked. Mm-hmm. That the Gentiles will listen to the message of the prophets, but the Jews won't, because they're stiff-necked and hard-hearted, that they're always a rebellious people. If I got up today and made those statements publicly, I would be rightly branded an anti-Semite. If I just got up and said all the Jews are stiff-necked and hard-hearted rebels and this and this and this and this. So if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls or the writings of Josephus, so these are writings from around the time of Jesus, a little bit before, a little bit after, and you see the inter-Jewish polemic, far, far harsher than anything that you see in the New Testament. It's shocking. This is one Jewish group attacking another Jewish group. So what you have in the New Testament,
family dispute.
Yeah, these are interfamily disputes, absolutely, and that's what you have in the New Testament. Jesus himself says salvation is of the Jews. You've got wonderful verses like that. Paul says the law is holy, just, and good. The New Testament confirms the promises to the patriarchs, and the Messiah confirms the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, doesn't cancel them. The ultimate city where we live forever is called the New Jerusalem. Yeshua is coming back to Jerusalem, according to the New Testament, and on it goes. The New Testament declares that all Israel shall be saved at the end, and that God's promises to Israel are irrevocable. So you have all these wonderful words. In the midst of it, there are polemics against corrupt leaders. There are polemics against, just like the prophets polemicized against their corrupt leaders. But this is Jew speaking to Jew. And the verses that have been taken, Paul was writing to Gentiles and sounded anti-Semitic. When you rightly understand them, and I break this down in volume 1 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, when you just rightly understand it, not doing all kinds of interpretive contortions, but you see, not anti-Semitic at all. Like Paul tells the Thessalonians, these Gentile Christians who've been suffering at the hands of their own people. He says, yeah, we've suffered at the hands of our own countrymen too. These Jews who killed the prophets and have crucified the Messiah and are always displeasing God. He's not talking about all Jews. He's talking about the Jews in Jerusalem, the bad apples that they had a bad time with and that were involved in crucifying the Messiah. That's what he's talking about. It's like, yeah, you're suffering from your countrymen. We're the same too. We got these bad apples. So there's nothing anti-Semitic about it. And the proof of the pudding is that when you have all these Gentile Christians around the world who read the Bible and read it as literally as it's intended to be read, right? These conservative Christians getting born again at these large numbers all around the world, they're friends of Israel. They pray for Israel. I remember being what to me was a jungle in India and meeting people who said, oh, we love the Jews. I was the first Jew they ever met. We pray for Israel 20 years. We celebrate the feast. I'm in Kenya and meet some guy named Shadrach. And he says his whole mission is to help the Church of Kenya bless Israel and pray for Israel. He had a backpack filled with cassette tapes he was giving out. It was like 1989. I've run into this around the world. Where did it come from? From reading the Bible. So when you do, it'll produce philo-Semitism. The last thing is you mentioned the real kosher Jesus. You held it up in Hebrew. So I have one chapter, and in the chapter I take quotes from different prophetic books, Isaiah, Ezekiel. I take the words of God from the Torah, and then I take some of Yeshua's words from the New Testament, and I just have quotes. I don't say who said what, but try to figure out who said it. Was this Yeshua? Was this God speaking? Was this Isaiah, Jeremiah? And the harshest, most extreme quotes are from God himself and from the Old Testament prophets. Yeshua's words seem mild in comparison, but you have to put everything in its right context. This is a prophet coming and rebuking his people in the tradition that we've had for centuries.
Yeah. Well, talking about the Jewishness of the New Testament, I actually came to faith before I actually read the New Testament, which was a miracle in and of itself. Not even getting past the first sentence of the first verse of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, where I saw the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, son of David, son of Abraham, and I was like, it can't get any other more Jewish than this. I mean, I said, it just drew me right in. So
I met an Israeli years ago, strong believer, and even though he wasn't religious, kind of like a superstitious thing, he would always have the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, with him. You know, so he's the IDF, you get one, and so he'd keep it with him, but wasn't religious. One day, he's given Brit Hadashah, New Testament, and starts. So he's reading in Hebrew, reading the genealogy of Jesus in Hebrew, and gets born again.
Right,
the light goes on. Now, just because it's Jewish doesn't mean it's true,
right.
But so you have to study to determine that it's true. But people are shocked. There is a large percentage of verses in the New Testament that either quote the Hebrew Bible or allude to it or presuppose it. The book of Revelation has a little over 400 verses, I believe 404 total verses. Some scholars estimate that as many as 278 of the 404 verses are drawn from imagery in the Hebrew Bible. Mm. It's that intertwined. You cannot make a separation.
Yeah. So we're still into historical objections. Let's talk about the Holocaust. Very sensitive subject. Because of our exposure to so many Jewish believers in Jesus here at Jews for Jesus, some of which are first and second-hand generation Holocaust survivors, we can see that the Holocaust is not a rational reason to reject Jesus. But to those out there that are watching that say because of the Holocaust and what happened to our Jewish people at the hands of those claiming to be Catholics and Christians, there's no way that I will ever believe in Jesus. What do you say to them?
Well, first, the suffering is unimaginable. You know, it's beyond comprehension. On a certain level, you just have to put your hand on your mouth and weep. The rabbi that befriended me once said to me, Michael, I can't explain the Holocaust with God, but I can't explain the Holocaust without God. You know, when you were talking about 2 out of every 3 European Jews slaughtered, when you're talking about 1.5 million children and babies, when you're talking about 9 out of every 10 Polish Jews slaughtered, I mean, it's incomprehensible. And the question of where was God? And then this was an allegedly Christian Europe. So, and without 15 centuries of growing anti-Semitism that bleeds into European Christian anti-Semitism, the Holocaust could not even have taken place. So it has to be approached with great care and without trite answers. What I would say in the midst of it is, I would point to how the Nazis were actually anti-Christian, how they persecuted Christians and killed them, and those that tried to be true to their faith ended up in the concentration camps, and that the true Christians were the ones trying to rescue Jews and help Jews. But beyond that, I would point to Yeshua's suffering. I would say he understands. We don't just need some Messiah riding on a white stallion who's going to come in and destroy our enemies. He suffered everything you could imaginably suffer. He was put to death in the most horrific way, but he was completely innocent. he actually understands. He came into our world and is the very one that we need. Elie Wiesel talks about one moving account in the Holocaust where there was a young boy, that the Nazis hung for some crime, something he did against their rules. And because he was so young and light in weight, he didn't die. Mm-hmm. He's hanging and he's kicking and he's flailing and he's not enough weight to break his neck. And it's this horrific scene, everyone watching in agony. And someone cries out, "Where is God? Why doesn't he intervene?" And the answer shouted back, "There he is, hanging on the gallows." And it's something that Jewish people can relate to in an odd way, that type of concept. And I said, "Where is God in our suffering?" There he is, hanging on a cross, suffering, but he's suffering for us, and he's doing it willingly. Yeah. Hopefully that's a bridge that can be built to someone that's been through the horrors of the Holocaust or had family that were in past generations, that there he is, God hanging on the cross, suffering for us.
Yeah. Well, we've been fortunate enough to see Jewish survivors of the Holocaust come to faith in Yeshua here. Yeah. And that's been amazing for me to see. You were mentioning the Ten Boom family. Wasn't Corey Ten Boom's sister? Did they both go to concentration camp?
Yeah, they both did. Ravensbrück. Yeah, and the sister died.
Right.
And her father died as well.
Right. Those were Christians.
All right, folks, stay tuned for the next exciting video with Dr. Michael Brown, where we will be discussing and answering theological Jewish objections to Jesus, such as, isn't worshiping Jesus idolatry? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to visit our website at jewsforjesus.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. God bless you all.